I feel like whenever I talk to my younger patients, like my Gen Z patients, they're just like, I don't really trust people. I don't really trust that they don't have STDs. People are lame. No one wants to be in a relationship. Like, fuck people. And so I don't deal with that, which I'm like, wow, like we got a lot of a lot of stuff to unpack there.
Alyssa, before the break, I goaded you about how you don't
You
like
love
to
to
talk
fuck
about.
with me.
I like to goad you. I like to prod you. We're talking about horniness today, but not in the way that a person might expect. It's sort of about the kind of disconnect between actual people acting out and having sex and being sexual versus displaying sexuality. And I could not be more excited about the group that we have to talk about that today. First, she's a comedian who hosts 2 podcasts, Making Fun of Sports and, God, I love that title, and I Love a Lifetime Movie. You know her, you love her. It's Megan Gailey.
Hello, signing in, not horny, but we'll see by the end of the show. I'm hopeful.
I will do my best to make everyone extremely horny. That is my vibe overall. One time I was at some Republican press thing or whatever, and I was talking to a woman who was like a leftist whatever, and she told me once that one of her editors was trying to encourage her to do more like video stuff, like Erin Ryan, but like sexy.
I find what you do to be very sexy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Rounding out the panel, she is a Brooklyn-based OB, a reproductive and sex health advocate, an Army vet, my favorite MD on TikTok. We are so excited to welcome back to the show Dr. Heather Irobunda. Heather, hi.
Hi. How's everyone?
I saw something on your Instagram and I really want you to talk about it. What is this with you having to dispel a myth about beard discoloration? Can you explain to us what the myth was and what you had to say?
So TikTok, is the home of all great random information. And so there were all of these videos that were like, if you know, with like, the actual acronym. And essentially it was like people showing their partner's beard with little like red hairs in it. And they were like, yeah, basically they believed that the beard, the change in the color of their partner's beard was due to the vaginal secretion.
No.
From cunnilingus, friend.
No.
Cunnilingus.
I think it's just you have Irish people in your family. I think that's what it is.
So, because I love research so much, I took a deep dive into why this was happening. I was like, in a practical sense, this can't be a thing because then we would all have like red or blonde pubes, like all of us, right? Like I would have like red or blonde pubes. And I was like, let me look down there and check. Yeah, still not red or blonde. And it's like one of 2 things. One is that there's this like, so the gene for red hair is actually, it's like a gene mutation. You have to have 2 of them in order to have just straight up red hair. But there are people who have just 1 mutation, not 2. So some of their hair can turn red over time. And that's probably what the partner has. Or they're turning gray, and some people turn red before they turn gray. You know how people use lemon juice to like dye their hair? So they thought like vaginal secretions were acidic enough to bleach beard hair, right? But that's like not true because lemon juice is way more acidic than your vag. Come on, friends. So I just felt like I taught a lot of science and biology.
I was gonna say if like vaginal secretions have the same pH as lemon juice, then Beyonce's lemonade takes on an entirely different meaning.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. So I saw that and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna ask her in person what this was about, because that is wild. And that's part of the reason that I am really glad that you're a part of this conversation today. We're going to kind of talk about something that's been percolating, I guess, in the discourse for a while, and that is that young people are having less sex than any of the previous generations who would willingly admit how much sex they were having. At the same time, we're sort of living in an age where image and sexiness are something that we're constantly being both bombarded with and projecting. Heather, have you noticed I guess a similar decrease in the amount of sexual activity that young people are having? Or have you noticed that there's like a downturn in people actually having sex?
Anecdotally, I would say yes, actually, because I feel like whenever I talk to my younger patients, like my Gen Z patients, they're just like, I don't really trust people. I don't really trust that they don't have STDs. People are lame. No one wants to be in a relationship. Like, fuck people. And so I don't deal with that, which I'm like, wow, like we got a lot of stuff to unpack there, where it's like I'm usually trying to be like, hey, like you don't have to be afraid that you're going to contract an STI, sexually transmitted infection, if you do certain things. You know what I mean? And I just feel like because there's so much information out there, people are like super scared of everyone else, and that's the vibe I pick up from younger folks. So yes, I think anecdotally, this is like this is the most encouraging that I've had to be to my patients about like having sex with folks, which is very interesting.
That's so interesting. And then, meanwhile, there's some kind of good outcomes to that too, like historically low rates of teen pregnancy, and all the, STDs among teenagers, I'm assuming would be commensurately lower if they're having less sex. But also as you move into your 20s, you become an adult animal and you need some sort of physical affirmation of, your own humanity. And so losing that seems like it's a little bit of a loss. Megan, the topic for today came from an article called "Everyone is Beautiful and No One is Horny." I wonder what your first impression or reaction was to that topic.
I think it makes sense. And also, every time I've been here as of late, I'm like, this is an intervention for me. Because I think I also probably fall into that a little bit. Like, as I was looking at everything for today, it's like, we're also quote unquote coming out of a global pandemic. So it's like people that were dating or having sex over the last 3 years with new people, I'm sure there was a sharp decline in that. And if you think about the social media or the front-facing aspect of it, when you have sex, it's with one other person. So you are getting hopefully validation or something like along those lines from one person. But if you are out in the world posting or existing at a restaurant in a very sexy outfit, that draws a lot more attention and validation than just intercourse with one person. And so it's kind of like a sit down dinner as opposed to a buffet. And we also have all of these different tools to be intimate with ourselves. Is that an oxymoron? But we don't necessarily need another person in the room to orgasm anymore.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of women specifically are less likely to orgasm when there is another person in the room, which is an entirely separate set of complaints. Alyssa, one of the things that they talk about in the article was about the way that movies have gotten less sexy. There's a bunch of reasons, like industry reasons, like trying to get past Chinese censors, for example, is one reason that movies are less horny than they used to be. Alyssa, I was thinking about the genre of like the horny date movie from like the 80s into like the late 90s. And do you remember this genre? Like, what are some examples of the horny date movie, and does it exist today?
Well, like, wasn't Weird Science kind of a horny date movie?
Oh, I'm thinking like Basic Instinct was like a horny date movie.
Guys, you have to, okay, we're talking date movie for me, different period of time than for you guys, okay? So, like, don't mind while I flash back to John Hughes. And actually, Basic Instinct I watched with my parents for the first time.
But it was, yes, like disclosure of like sexual thrillers, but then also.
Yeah, see, I was in college.
Yeah.
I was in college.
I
for
would
all
throw
that, you
Fast
guys.
and the Furious in too. I've almost never made it through a full
my
one.
God.
I feel like those are hookup
I was
films.
like in menopause when that came out. But guys, my favorite part, the most seen I felt in this entire article was when they flash back to 1982 and talk about Poltergeist and how like Craig T. Nelson, who was in it, was like kind of paunchy and he had like a beer belly, but he still was like sexy and fun. And like, so was his wife. And then they talk about how like the houses are different now in movies, that like now everything is like pristine and sterile and it back in the 80s, quote, the houses look real too. There are toys and magazines scattered on the floor. There are cardboard boxes waiting to be unpacked. Framed pictures rest against the wall. The parents haven't gotten around to mounting them yet. The kitchen counters are cluttered and meal times are rambunctious and sloppy. Guys, if there was ever a description of me as a person, it is that description of the house. I just have things leaning up against the wall waiting to be hung.
Dr. Heather, and this is kind of stepping outside of your office, but to you, what is performing sex or sexiness look like versus like actually doing it?
So that's what I actually find really interesting in like social media, because I feel like even some of the folks who like you would say are like, you know, sexy and they're like performing sexy and whatnot, like if you really talk to them, sometimes they're like, yeah, I like don't really even have sex like that. There's like some TikTok person who like writes like the most raunchy, weird, like my TikTok algorithm is like a hot mess. Like I get the most weird, ridiculous stuff. And there's this chick, Cupcake, who like apparently is a virgin, has like never had sex, but all of her songs are about sex and she's wearing like sexy stuff. And so it's like very interesting because I feel like there's this kind of like outward performance aspect to sex now that like people are like, yeah, that's just like what I do out there, but like in my real life I'm not into that. Like I'm not into like the intimacy. I don't really want to touch people. I think there are a lot of, you know, I think with the pandemic people are like afraid of catching, you know, COVID or something. And so I think that it's really put up a wall for people. And so now it's like, let's do this all on like in a virtual way. So I think it's kind of interesting.
So it's like a freak in the streets, but a lady in the sheets.
Yeah, the opposite of what we all were taught. Right?
It's a phenomenon that goes past social media. I see it a lot in stand-up, and it'll be like almost women especially that have very sexual acts that I know to not be sexual beings.
Can you talk more about that? What do you mean?
It's people who have, you know, sort of crafted a brand around talking a lot about sex and hookups and having sexual partners and the type of sex they like. And then they have had like the same partner for 15 years, or they will say to you, like, I actually haven't had sex in 4 years. But it's like they feel like they can't pivot, or they feel it's very empowering to be able to talk about especially women's sexuality in that way. So I think it's just, I don't know. It's the same as people being like, my wife, and they've been divorced for 5 years. Like sometimes you just don't want to write new jokes too. You're like, well.
Alyssa, what do you think that sex is less stigmatized now than it was before? And so it's like people are having it less because it's like less naughty?
I don't think it's that it's less naughty. I think it's that you can kind of find it anywhere. Like when I was growing up, you know, you had to go, there was like the occasional naughty movie that would be like in a theater, like if you could get into rated R. Then there was like the one friend who maybe had Cinemax, you know, you'd watch something at like 11 o'clock at night. But other than that, there was not the, like, I didn't grow up with the internet. You know, to me, learning about sexuality came from like MTV, honestly. And so I think now it's just different, that it's just everywhere. You can find whatever you specifically are interested in anywhere. And so it's like you don't have to maybe put up with limited resource. Like, you're not funneling all your effort into one channel. You know what I mean? You can kind of scattershot and see what works for you.
I had MTV growing up, and, when I was just like a little Midwestern teen who like wasn't allowed to date. And I remember being so intimidated by what I saw on MTV, like MTV Spring Break. I was like, that is how college kids act?
Oh,
Heather, you're nodding big time. Did you have a similar experience?
Oh yeah, I was like your little first gen. Parents are like, my dad's Nigerian. Like my parents like don't talk about sex. Like I wasn't explained like what my period did or whatever. It was just like, and now you don't even look at boys. I went to all girls high school and Catholic school. Yeah, it was just. I did grow up in New York, so I did get some things just by walking down the street. But yeah, I remember watching MTV and being like, whoa, this is intense. Like, is it like you just turn 18 and then you take like, you wear bikinis and your like ass is out like on the beach on spring break? Is this like what we do? Like, I don't know.
Right, you like suddenly know
really
how to take body shots or whatever. You know like the procedure and like the etiquette around taking a shot off of some stranger's navel in Cancun. Like I remember seeing that display and being like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to really play catch up when I get to college. And Megan, you're kind of nodding.
Videos.
Oh yeah, the videos too.
Yeah.
And like music videos. Like I remember being like, I'm a hip hop stan. Yeah. So like I literally would see these videos and I'm like, so let me try to teach myself how to twerk and let me see like, is this what sexy and sex means? Like that's where I got all my knowledge, even like what things were, like all the different like, terminologies for like fellatio and whatever you want to say. You know what I mean? You learn so much stuff from MTV and now you can just Google it.
I watched an infuriating and somewhat heartbreaking and interesting documentary about the guy who created Girls Gone Wild. And so much of that.
What a piece of shit.
And like it.
Yes. Joe Francis.
Yes. And
Joe
he's
Francis?
like
Yes, Joe
somehow
Francis.
even worse in his personal life than in his business life. I think, Erin, what you're talking about and like what and Dr. Heather, what we were seeing was so synonymous with alcohol and being like having alcohol poured on you, but then also like being really needing to get drunk to be able to put yourself in a situation where you're willing to like flash your boobs for a camera. And I want to give credit to the younger generation. I think they probably have a much healthier relationship with substances and with also having boundaries of like, I remember the first time I had a boyfriend be like, hey, when you're really drunk, I actually don't want to have sex with you. And I was like, what? I thought that was like every man's dream. And I think there's been an evolution of like, no, that's actually
that's bad.
That's bad. And that is not consent. And it also might not feel good. Like if you even think about like the reason he was saying, he was like, it makes me feel icky. Like it makes me feel like I'm a bad guy. It's weird. And so I think that there's been a positive changing of the tide there too.
But here's my kind of thought on that. I think there is a positive changing of the tide, but I also think about, these kids, I sound so old, but they, we got the internet in our house when I was like 14, right? And most people now have had it since way younger, and most people have had it with way faster speeds, and most people have had that one friend who had bad parents who let them access pornography. And so kids are seeing, here's me putting myself in that headspace. I'm a 9-year-old girl and I see pornography. I would be like, nope, I am out, opt out. Nope, not doing this, not doing any of it, not interested, no thank you. And I feel like and pornography is like an extreme example, but like even the specialized stuff that you can find that's like not pornography, but that still is like, oh, this is the perfect looking version of this type of woman. This is the perfect looking version of this type of man. Like if you're surrounded by this like AI aided, photoshopped, airbrushed, filtered perfection, I think there gets to be a point where you're just like, nope, I'm not not doing this. I don't know. Does that seem to make sense to you guys? I don't know.
Also, do you feel like basically that all the stories that Gen Zers have heard from people who did engage in this life, they were like, what did you get from it? Like, guys, okay, we all know that I am not a horny person. I am not a overtly sexual person, like by any stretch. And let me tell you something. I tried best as I could to live my inner Sex and the City life, which came out right when I graduated college. And like going to polyesters and making out with the guy, the Welsh paratrooper, who it turned out was neither Welsh nor paratrooper, contributed nothing to my life. Nothing. You heard it here first. Like, it just didn't. And if Volpe and Kara are listening, we all know the Welsh paratrooper I speak of. And so, like, maybe they're just like, what good did it do? Watch all of Sex and the City. Where did it net out for everybody? Like, so it's like, just do what you want to do. Like, it's like, I feel like a lot of what everybody was doing in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s was like performative to live up to something. And then everyone was like, the fuck, this isn't fun, cool, I'm tired, these people suck. Like, maybe I'll just wait it out.
So do you think that the projection of sexuality, like this, I feel like now there's been a break. Like people understand that there's like a huge difference between the performance of sexuality and actually being sexual. It's like it's become self-aware. Heather, you're nodding. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on
It's
this.
true. I think that it's so interesting because even the discussion of consent, right? Like, I think that even as a doc, we talk about that a lot more with our patients, even in the type of work that I do as a gynecologist. And then it spills out into like, I have these conversations with adolescent patients, like, how, are you dating anybody? Are you, interested in anybody? Like, do you feel like you can speak up for yourself? What does that look like? Do you understand what these concepts mean? And I think that's being introduced because I'm like, I never had that experience as a patient. Like when I was, getting my first PAP at like 18, like it didn't happen. It was like, get up on the bed. This is what you have to do. And like, get over yourself. Sorry about that. There's somebody actually hand gliding from my building right now that I was not expecting. And I'm like, and my dog is like, who is that? I think they're cleaning the window.
That sounds fun.
Because I live on the
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and I'm on the 28th floor, so it's like really.
I mean, who needs sex when you can hang
weird.
glide off a 28th floor?
I know. It's wild. It's wild. But yeah, like I just find that there's this disconnect. Like people are just very much like, set. Like I feel like older generations were more sexually free. Like, okay, like I have sex with like, kind of like whatever, like I can make out and that's fine. Right. And I feel like I meet a lot of patients that are like, wait, like, should I be doing this? Can I do this? Like, is this okay? Like, what does this all mean? Like, and then you can even see it like in social media stuff, the questions that like get asked where people are just like, I mean, like, but do we all have to be having sex? And you're like, wow, this is not a question that I ever even thought. I was like, we have to be. This is what we're supposed to do. This is what all of the inputs that I've been getting from MTV, from my friends, from even, from everything. It's like, you're supposed to like date. And like now it's like even, I think people are just not even into like what we consider traditional too. It's like, there's all different types of relationships. And like, I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think that it's really changed the framework by which the younger generations are looking at relationships and intimacy and stuff. And we're seeing the results of that. And maybe that means less sex.
Megan, do you think that it's that sex is so saturated and like everything out there is available and so it's just like not exciting anymore because none of it is like there's nothing new under the sun?
I think there's probably some truth to that. And just sort of like they may be overcorrecting. Like I hope my son's generation is like, ew, get off my phone. Like they don't want to be on technology because we've been so technology driven. That's gotta be it. I don't know. This is like making me feel really old too. Cause I'm even thinking about like dating in terms of it was a means to an end where it was like, well, I want to get married and have a family. And so I was like, well, I was a slut in my 20s and then I was a slut until CJ basically. And thank God he doesn't listen to this. He knows that. But it's like, oh, wow, that if you don't want to get married and have children, you may be like, I don't need to do this unless it's making me feel good. And I just feel like I am hearing a lot of feedback that it does not make people feel good.
Because I think that even like maybe Megan, you and I are like, you're a couple years younger than me, but we're like effectively the same age, right? I think that a lot of people that I went to college with, and granted, I did go to a Catholic school, so maybe it skews a little bit more conservative than average, but I feel like a lot of people, even when they were living out their like slut years, were doing it partly because like with the awareness that eventually they
couldn't do that anymore.
They were, yeah, exactly.
It had an
was
expiration
like,
date.
Yes. Exactly. And it's like, this is something that isn't very much fun for me right now, but it's what I'm supposed to be doing until I get to an age where I I'm ready to meet somebody that I would want to marry.
Right. It's the kissing the frog is probably the less wild way to say slut phase. The end of all of those was like, and then I'll be rewarded with the right thing. And I think even people in every single generation have gone, and my reward is taking care of another person or whatever it is. It's like that reward has started to sound pretty shitty to some people.
Yeah, one thing that we haven't really like gotten into much, we mentioned like movies and stuff, and the article that inspired this topic talks about entertainment and like Marvel superheroes being like attractive, like hot, but they don't have sex. Like the Marvel superheroes don't fuck. And, you know, part of that is because I wasn't kidding. Like Hollywood makes a lot of movies for the biggest movie market in the world, which is China. And your movie will not play in China if you've got like, you know, Superman and Wonder Woman doing 69 or whatever. You know, like that's not going to fly. But also, I think there's something to be said about, you know, culture influences, society influences culture. Alyssa, I understand that you have some experience with like censorship because you, believe it or not,
I was censored.
You were too horny for something.
Imagine, guys, I was too horny for China and Walmart, apparently.
Good for you.
The cover for my first book is a picture of President Obama and I sharing a seat on the plane. In China, they changed it, and Japan, China and Japan, it was changed. The cover was changed to a picture of him standing and me looking up at him adoringly. And on the second book, we were making a joke about my IBS and also like trusting your gut. And the title was originally supposed to be like, the final thing was supposed to be like, and not giving a shit. And they were like, Walmart's not gonna sell that. And I was like,
so
what?
Sex and poop they're against. Wow.
Yes. And then there was a picture of me. There was one where I was like very clearly sitting on a toilet and one where it was more like just like a prop. And we went with the one that was more like a prop because sitting on the toilet, problem for China and Japan.
Wow.
In that,
you know, in the early 90s,
man.
they would have let you run. They would have let you run with that in the early 90s. A hornier time.
Are you kidding? It would have been so great. And now they're like, button it up
with the sharing of the airplane seat. It's like they're the ones who sexualized it. It's the same. I feel like the GOP
right.
does this about children all the time. It's like you're the ones making them choose. Like it's like they're children, and you were working together.
So, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that was it. And totally like, you know, it was very proper.
Wow.
It was very proper.
Well, there you have it, Alyssa Mastromonaco, a symptom of our unhorny times.
Sexiest White House worker alive.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
there you go.
From your lips to God's ears.
I would buy that People magazine issue for sure.
For sure.
I would buy it. I would buy it and I would frame it.
My over the shoulder.
Gotta keep those shoulders covered though, because if
they're always covered.
Missouri House of Representatives, you are
They'd come for me.
violating because you're too sexy with your arms and stuff like that.
Guys, every day.
just
Every
too
day. I'm too
sexy.
sexy.
You know, Dr. Heather, as a gynecologist, how many shoulders do you look at?
That's actually a very interesting question. I actually see more armpits than shoulders. Hear me out. So
Breast exam.
breast exams, exactly.
right.
So
I'm
typically-
self-examining.
I think you can use
I'm
you
self-examining.
can use an armpit as like a vessel to put a penis in too, though, I believe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Megan.
you can.
Wow.
It's all on. These things are on
Wow.
TikTok.
Your
guys. Like,
knees,
Megan,
yeah,
I
anywhere where
learned
there's a bend.
so much. Yeah, a cocoon.
Yeah.
This is the horniest the show has ever been. Thank you, Megan Gailey.
I'm
that.
hot.
Oh, yeah, because I said a vessel for a
Sex
penis. You know, that's really tipping the scales up.
Yeah, well, a vessel for a penis is if you Google that, you got to have safe search on because you will get
Yes, you do.
Yeah, some 1970s
I'll get reported at
results.
my job, guys.
Wow, okay.